Welcome, everybody. Where's the camera? Put it in. There. Welcome, people online, people in the room, to the Faculty of Architecture and the Built Environment. On this event on ESG and affordability, organized by the Department of Management in the Built Environment, and more in particular by Alex Fernández and Peeters. We will have a debate about ESG this afternoon after some presentations. And I think this debate is about research done in this university, in this faculty. And we are really delighted to welcome important stakeholders from outside here at the front row. Because we do research, we have debates, and we want to share the knowledge and get input from people outside on the topic for the next research question. But maybe even more important, how can our research impact society? That's what TU Delft aims for. So I'm really looking forward to the debate this afternoon. And my name is Marja Elsinga. I am a professor in Housing Institutions and Governance here in the faculty at the Department of Management in the Built Environment. This is the program for this afternoon. We will have presentations from a Readwell project, a project for the European Commission, and from a new impulse in our department on value of the built environment of real estate and purpose. So these are three different streams in the department coming together. I'm not only professor in this faculty, I'm also a member of the management team of the Readwell project for the European Commission. What I'm going to do in the next couple of minutes, I know we're already a bit late, to tell a bit about this project for the European Commission. It is on affordable, sustainable housing, the combination. Then I will tell a bit. We had a preparation meeting online for this event, and then the question arose, what is housing affordability? Why is affordability interesting? I'm going to deal very short with these issues. So first, the Readwell project. It is an innovative training network, and it researches the topic of affordable sustainable housing, and in particular the tension between the two. It is a project where there are 50 ESRs, as we call them in the project. There is one of them, an early stage researcher. These are young, bright people working on a PhD project somewhere in the field of sustainable and affordable housing. So 15 young people in the project, and the project is on 10 universities, many people from architecture, but also from social science and from the a bit more from the engineering part. It's not only academia involved in this project, it's also partner organizations from social housing, municipalities, construction industry. So this project is what we call transdisciplinary. Transdisciplinary means crossing different disciplines, economics and architecture. It's not easy, I can share with you, to join the different languages. And then also not only to cross academic disciplines, but also to work together with people from practice. So many partners, Anita Blessing, she's a bit late, she will join. She's one of the partners trying to give him, Anita, sorry, I missed you. She's one of the partners giving input, asking questions, and being with us to also think about how can the research results be implemented. The Readwell project, there is, these are the 15 ESRs. Look at them. There is a link to the website. if you want to know more. And here is a very short overview in this project about affordable sustainable housing. There are 3 blocks. One is about design, planning, and building. The other block is about community participation. The third block is about policy and financing. And Alex, Fernández, and also Tijn Kroon, based here in Delft, they are in the part of policy and finance for affordable sustainable housing. Then the question, why is affordable housing relevant? Housing matters. Then we come to the Sustainable Development Goals, also the background of ESG, the ambition to create a better world, to summarize it really shortly. And housing matters. I mean, housing impacts individuals. It's about access to housing, energy, health, well-being, socio-economic position. Having a place means having access to society and the labor market. Impact on society. It's sustainable cities and communities. This has an impact on society, on inclusiveness and energy consumption. Housing policies, for some decades, there was a lot of discussion around market efficiency and all kinds of policies for housing, affordable housing, destroying the market, destroying competition from the economic perspective. I think this report from the OECD from 2021, called Brick by Brick, Building Better Housing Policies, is an interesting one, where there is a re-evaluation of housing policies and emerging the aim how important housing is for inclusiveness of societies. So this report was an incentive for many countries to build brick by brick policies for affordable housing. About housing policies, there's not one policy to make housing affordable. Countries are very different, and they also have different housing policies. Governments can provide housing, affordable housing themselves. Public housing, government can provide subsidies for housing, for landlords, for homeowners, subsidize the bricks and mortar, object subsidies, or there are subsidies available for people, subject subsidies, housing allowance, toeslag, housing benefit. Then there is a regulation of prices, regulation of quality, regulation of rents. And finally, affordable housing. It's very important to see that governments can also make agreements with private, many non-profit organizations, housing associations, cooperations, all kinds of organizations that are private but aim to provide affordable housing, and they can have some kind of agreement with the government that supports them by land policy or otherwise. A very brief overview. And then the question, what is affordable housing? What is social housing? What is public housing? We have an expert in the room, Marietta Hafner. She's an expert in housing affordability, and we can fill 2 days with the question, what is affordable housing? I will not do it now, but just provide an overview of housing affordability in relation to social housing, public housing. What we see here is one dimension describing profit, non-profit, another public-private. When we talk about social housing, that is housing that is non-profit, and that can be private and public. Public housing is owned by the government, that can be profit-driven or non-profit. But when we talk about housing affordability, it is important to see if housing is affordable for people. You can measure that by comparing housing cost expenses with income. Residual income is another measure. But I think for this afternoon, it is not necessary. It is important to keep in mind what housing affordability is. And the most important is, this afternoon, the impacts of ESG. When we talk about ESG, we talk about 3 pillars of reporting: environment, social, government. We read a lot about it. I do. I see many things. But really understanding what is the impact now and in the future, I do not know. I'm eager to learn this afternoon. What we learned in the project in the Readwell is there can be a tension between affordability and sustainability. That's the project of Alex about these tensions of the dimension. If we talk about the E of ESG, environmental, there's a lot of reporting going on. And we found out so far that this has an impact on the workload of housing providers, this reporting. And there's also another effect, and that is making houses sustainable social housing. That means renovation, retrofitting. That goes with cost. That can go with rent increases. And another effect is, if houses are not sustainable and the investment required is high, it can lead to demolition of affordable housing. These are impacts that are interesting, that we came across so far. I'm really curious about the S and the G. What will be the impact? The S is about the role of the employer having a social company. It's also about clients and impact and governance. There's less written about the S and the G. And I think it is an interesting topic for this afternoon to explore what it could mean. So I leave it here. And I would like to give the floor to ESR Alex Fernández. Looking very much forward.
So, yeah, thank you, Maria, for that very kind introduction. So, my name is Alex. I'm a PhD candidate here at TU Delft, working with Maria Elsinga and Marietta Hafner. And today I will be presenting some of my research on ESG finance for affordable and social housing across Europe. A little bit about myself. My background started with studying history and political science. Then I went on to study urban policy, urban sociology in London. I worked for a while at Peeters, a social housing provider in the UK. And then I studied economics. So I've been told that my background is not erratic or chaotic. It's transdisciplinary, as Manuel very well said. That's a much better selling point, actually. But what it means is that I do, on the one hand, quantitative analysis on micro data at the level of the household, but also qualitative, much more institution-based analysis across different European countries on this other paper here on the left. The research project that funds my research, as Maria said, is Readwell, and I'm extremely happy, not only because of my salary, but also because they've given me amazing access to all these great organizations that are here, to Clarion in the UK, South Yorkshire Housing Association, Incasol, and Housing Europe, who have been instrumental in gaining access to stakeholders and to participants for this research project. And yeah, ESG. So ESG is the name of today. We see it popping up everywhere. Elon Musk, call it a scam. Not that we need to pay attention to Elon Musk in any way, but the European Union is putting a lot of effort into monitoring the different flows of investment that go into ESG. But at the same time, there's this greenwashing scandals that keep popping up. What is actually green? What is not? What is sustainable? And the German police has a lot of interest in it. But also in the world of social housing, we've got private providers for profit, in this example in the UK, Sage, issuing green bonds and using the procedures to build affordable housing. So the point of departure of this particular research project was the increased legislative activity by the EU on the topic of ESG. And there's mainly three pieces of legislation. On the one hand, we've got the taxonomy that categorizes activities. In our case, as Maria was saying, it is new build and renovation, and it sets different environmental standards. There's also the SFDR, the Sustainable Financial Disclosure Regulation, which categorizes funds. And this is for those investment vehicles that need to claim certain sustainability credentials, and they need to classify themselves. And as you can see in these two graphs, there's been quite a lot of activity on classifying under one very dark green fund, and then declassifying, and then classifying again. So let's say that there's certain turmoil in the financial world on what it means to be green. And finally, there is the CSRD, which is a series of disclosure requirements for companies that aims to create a data set that is comprehensive and reports not only on financial indicators, but on sustainability. And just to recap, how do these two, let's say, the legislative agenda of the EU and social housing finance come together? And usually, if we go at an abstract level across Europe, we get a social housing organization in the middle that builds, rents, or sells housing, and it accesses private capital through mostly bonds and loans, but also equity in the case of some of the larger German providers. And the piece that we're missing here is the state, and the government has a very big say on how social housing is financed across Europe. And again, I'm here remaining at a very abstract level, trying to cover all of Europe, but we know that there are guarantees that affect bonds here in the Netherlands. We'll hear more about that. We've got direct subsidies and grants to the providers themselves to build, like in the UK or in France or in Germany. And then lastly, we've got housing benefits that target the residents themselves. So we see a series of government interventions that in a way decrease the risk of social housing investments through different routes. Now, the point of departure for my research was how does the different type of ESG legislation impact this process? You know, if we've got the taxonomy that determines what is green at the building level, at the renting level, then how does that impact the CSRD at the level of the social housing organization? And the impact on the funds and the investors themselves, you know, and try to, in a way, tease out this influx of capital. The interesting part here is that some of the social housing providers are, of course, excluded from the CSRD because they're not for-profit corporations. However, and I'm very interested in discussing this, if your investor is going to come under SFDR disclosure or CSRD disclosure requirements, then implicitly the system will work to trigger the disclosure of data from any company in the end. It's about building a net of disclosing mechanisms that will have an impact ultimately on how we build, on how we provide affordable social housing. So this was very simply the research question: how does the switch to ESG finance impact social housing finance? And to do that, as I was saying, this project was mainly quantitative, which is conducted a series of interviews, mostly when I was seconded at Housing Europe about 2 years ago. And I'm very thankful to Alice Kitini, who may be online. Thank you very much for all your contact in gaining access to this series of experts, practitioners, consultants across a wide array of European countries. And we wanted to interrogate three premises. The first one being that ESG produces cheaper capital, lower borrowing costs for ESG-aligned activities. The second one, that ESG compliant companies are balancing these three objectives that we're going to talk about, the E, the S, and the G. And third, a more, let's say, macro approach to the impact of ESG, where we wanted to ask about whether capital is being given and if that's being spread across Europe in a similar way. If there are different distributional impacts, let's say, or that is reaching areas at different speeds. And the words of Frans Timmermans, we wanted to interrogate this very premise. No, we want everyone in Europe to have a home they can light, heat, or cool without breaking the bank or breaking the planet. So that was the point of departure of the investigation. And well, just diving into some of the findings. For the first premise, do ESG activities get cheaper access to capital? And here we first get the interviews towards these pan-European public banks that are already very heavily supported by member states. So they already have a very good credit rating. And what they mention is that, in fact, for them, there is not the financial incentive that is leading them to report and disclose on ESG terms. If we follow this stream downwards towards the social housing providers themselves, here I've got the French example, where the French public bank, the CDC, and the two pan-European investment banks sort of come together and transpose these very good lending conditions to the housing providers themselves. So what we reach in the French case is a point where interest rates are not determined by risk, but they're determined by how low your rents can be. So in this trade-off, the redistributive mechanism of the French public banks is already producing very low interest rates for French social housing providers. And if we contextualize this within the institutional arrangement that enables social housing provision, what we can start to tease out is that there is a very, let's say, low spread between the basis rate and the actual interest rate that social housing providers are paying. So in the end, there's very low margin of maneuver for ESG to produce additionality, which is this term that we keep hearing, at least additionality in the interest rate sense. What we are seeing in different countries, in the Dutch context, is the guarantee. In the French context, there's a mixture of guarantee and subsidized loans. Is the impact is more geared towards broadening the pool of investors. The public banks are more interested in formulating a market, in defining the financial sector, in setting a standard, than in realizing a financial incentive that is going to reduce their borrowing costs. Then my second point is on the balancing of environmental and social activity. And here I go again to the French case that is very analogous to the situation in the Netherlands. We've got this idea of double materiality. It's not only how, let's say, the climate is impacting on you, it's also how you're being impacted by the climate. And in the case of social housing providers, the main risk is regulatory risk, is attaining the energy efficiency of the housing stock by a certain number of years within a deadline. And in the French case, they've got very strict deadlines. And this is particularly already starting to impinge on the rating scores of different types of housing providers. So I was talking to rating agencies, they focus on different types of providers that they rate, increasing the debt. And there's a particular ratio, the net debt to EBITDA. And if we consider that their debt is going up and their income stays the same, that will lead to a revision of their credit rate. So in a way, we see how at the board level, there is a restructuring of funds and priority towards environmental priorities, sometimes creating tensions. And I'm not going to say at the expense, because I think that'd be going a step too far, but creating tensions with the social objectives of landlords, of social landlords. And there's two main strategies that are being followed. There's other systems, there's ESCO systems for renovation, there's alternative models, but the tensions are arising from either an increase of revenue to surpass this split incentive, where there's the landlord that makes the investment and the resident that has the energy saving, and there's rents increases that have been tied to renovation in countries like Germany, for example. But there's also deeper strategic decisions that are being made by housing associations to comply with environmental standards. And I'm referring to reducing the new construction pipelines and to different sellers and strategic management of their stock. There is social housing providers in the UK that are just not well positioned financially to renovate their stock. So it works very well for the larger ones that can renovate following on their internal revenue. But the smaller social housing providers in local areas that are maybe highly levered, they do not have access to this financing rates, and they're having to compromise their new construction pipelines to renovate their stock. Now, it's difficult to put a figure on the number of social homes that we are foregoing by focusing on renovation, but it's something to keep in mind, something to keep an eye out, because the trade-off may be further down the line that we're realizing about it. And my third point, following on this topic of size and economies of scale, has to do with how ESG finance is landing at different speeds in different places. And here I've got an example from a very large provider, for profit in Germany, that is saying 2 billion a year over renovation green. So we put this in context with how other providers are having access to capital, we see inequalities start to arise. And this particular case has been complemented also by quantitative evidence in the same sector. And here we've got the comparison between a green bond and a traditional bond and a 10 basis point discount that another large housing provider in Germany was able to achieve. So we've got the counterfactual, the green premium is there. However, on the other hand, in England, ESG is perceived more as a form of gatekeeping, to just keep the rates that they currently have when they're accessing capital, these social housing providers. They're seen as having to invest extremely on this, on the cost of managing the information, of capturing this data and releasing it to just maintain the interest rates that they have access to right now. And those are my key takeaways on the third point, the difference in sizes and also difference in systems. It seems that commercially oriented housing providers that are larger, that are hence more risky, are reaping the benefits of issuing green because there's more room for maneuvering there to reach a green premium. And well, in policy studies, there is this saying, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. So just to conclude, I want to leave you with 3 ideas. The baby here being affordable housing, and the bathwater being energy inefficient houses. And this comes from my interviewees, so I'm very interested in gathering input on these 3 main points. So there's a tension between the sustainable finance framework and national regimes, but there's also a lot of room for aggregators to produce this economies of scale to lift everybody up to the same level. There's companies like the Housing Finance Corporation in the UK that are doing great work at aggregating and pooling in all the resources, making the data into a way they can approach the market and being those intermediaries. Also, there's the idea of using cross-financing, like it's being used in England, in other countries. I think we'll hear a lot about the DAB, non-DAB sector further down in the roundtable, but maybe there's a way to lever those more financially risky opportunities to reinvest in social housing. A second point is the lack of a real definition of what is social, a codification of the social taxonomy within the EU legislation. And finally, the idea of cherry picking. There is a cream skimming process where ESG capital is only landing on those that are already very well positioned, that are already developing as front runners the sustainable finance frameworks, but is not reaching those that are in a worse financial situation, probably. So ultimately, there's limits to private finance, and there is more that could be done at the European level. I'm thinking of the new rules on state aid that have been recently changed, the idea of grant aid. So there's many policies that we could use to contextualize ESG. Yeah, thank you very much for your attention. This is the QR for my paper, if you are interested. Yeah, thanks. And over to Michael.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very well done. Thank you for that. So I don't have much to say, except I have the honor to introduce our new research group. So we're in the section of Hilde, actually, real estate management, and we're going to study value, right, in the broadest way. So not only monetary value, but also looking at social, environmental value, nature value, everything that has to do with value and the built environment will be at our end. For that, we actually we are very lucky to attract two brilliant researchers, almost as brilliant as Alex, but they will prove to become more brilliant in the near future. Well, they didn't prove anything yet, but we're sure that we will surpass him very soon. And they will just pitch their research so that they get used to the stage they will occupy often in the near future, and so that we can actually enjoy what they're researching. Jasmine, yes. Please.
Hi everyone, my name is Jasmine, and as Michael has mentioned, I'm a new PhD student with the New Values Group. And today I'm going to give a radically condensed history of value theory to highlight the underlying preferences and bias that color our understanding of real estate valuation, but current day appraisal methods as well. But it also points to how contemporary issues have been on the minds of ancient scholars. Start off in antiquity, where in ancient Greece, they believed that price ought to correspond to quality, even though that's not always the case. And in modern appraisal literature, this emerges as the normative versus positive perspective. However, once again, radically condensed, but the end of commercial life during the Middle Ages, we did not see value theory progress for centuries, with a brief revival of exchange during the scholastic times. And this is when the idea of the just price is not really a fixed number anymore, but rather an estimate or a range of monetary terms for what value could mean. In the emergence of the modern state, the mercantilists and political economists sort of had opposing views of what this could look like, but moving away from feudalism, there was this capacity and the space to think about what value could mean. The mercantilists thought that there was a natural value that is inherent to products, also in the relation of supply to demand, whereas the early political economists considered value from a scarcity and demand-driven process. Think the water and diamond paradox, I'm sure we're all familiar with, which informed actually the first two official theories of value, where human labor is considered to be the most important factor in value creation, and value is tied to the cost of production. But also it was in keeping with the times of the 1700s, and this is not really the case anymore. So 100 years later, the subjective theory of value was developed, where value is dependent on an individual's preference, what they gain from it, and such, also considering the law of marginal utility. As you can see, they are all quite cyclical and they react upon each other. So looking at maybe the neoclassical school now and the dominant train of thought of how we got to it at the study of economics today, we developed contemporary economic tools such as econometrics, but also how we were able to capture and measure this market value through the cost approach, through the sales comparison approach, and also the income approach. However, during the divorce of economics and social relationships, we had the field of economics as it is, and the field of social science as it is. The heterodox school wants to bring back potentially more of the concept of social provisioning back into the very mathematical, if you will, provision of what economics could look like, which is related to my research and how this application of heterodox thinking can induce new meanings of value in the built environment, like ESG, like affordability, that potentially is not monetized and maybe shouldn't be monetized, but also how financing and how we see value in the future could look like. Because as we've seen from this type of history and time period, it is very much, our concept of value is very much related to the zeitgeist, and now we are very in a stage of environmental and social and governance balance. So thank you for your attention, and I'll give the stage to Maria, who will also be talking about value from a different perspective.
So thank you for coming. I'm Maria Villalba, and I'm also a lucky member of this new value group. My research is about sustainability investment strategy in real estate under climate uncertainty, and then how can we preserve the value of our built environment. So although in my research I'm mainly focusing on commercial real estate, you could say that it has certain similarities also with housing associations, in the sense that they are being impacted by increasing sustainable regulations. So as we heard from Alex, such as the CSRD, EU taxonomy. In the case of commercial real estate, it is also being impacted by the hybrid working trend and the decrease of office labor market that is pushing companies to reduce the office surface areas and prioritize quality over quantity. And in terms of change of attitude towards sustainability, we're seeing that the conversation of who's the best in class is expanding from one that is considering environmental values to also social ones. So far, when we think of sustainability, we consider it more from an environmental perspective. From a valuation perspective point of view, these we can see it on green premiums being considered mainly as a proxy for value. There's plenty of research that has already provided evidence of green buildings' effect on transaction values and on rents. However, the problem is that those results can be misleading because they mainly focus on green building certifications, also on energy labels that sometimes usually don't account for actual environmental performance. And also these results are often too complex and consider of limited uses used for valuers because it's very difficult for them to put them in practice. And the third consideration is that green premiums will decline over time. So as green buildings become the standard, we cannot really keep charging a premium for something that's considered normal. And then what's going to happen is that assets that do not comply with these new standards will be at risk of having a brown discount. And this leads for an investor perspective to switch the conversation towards sustainability from one of value creation, so the green premium one, to one of value preservation, to the extent that from a CBRE report survey about real estate investors' main sustainability priorities, they agree that the most important priority is to protect the future value of real estate assets, which leads our question of how can we preserve the value of our built environment to be relevant in our context. However, to answer this question, we also need to address what are we exactly trying to protect. So how can we evaluate what's the value at risk in our built environment? And not only considering it from a monetary point of view, but also trying to include social and environmental aspects to it. So for example, in the case of housing associations, affordability will play an important role. So therefore, what I will be trying to do in these upcoming years is first try to identify what is the value at risk due to external factors. So what are the environmental and social factors that lead to having stranded assets, and how can we balance these factors? The second thing is to identify what is the value at risk to sustainable regulation. So what is the impact that the EU sustainable finance has over our assets? Develop a framework to evaluate then what is the value at risk according to these factors. Then test how is the interaction within this spatial perspective. So what is the impact that an investment, for example, that ticks all the boxes within the EU taxonomy has over its surroundings, over its neighbors, over its urban context. And then how is the game among the players that are involved in this context. And this will lead us to policy implications on how can we optimize at the reporting standards, and also what is the best strategy to tackle this issue. Of course, it's regretfully too early to give you insights on results of this research. We do hope to keep in touch and then collaborate when it makes sense. So thank you.
So that's some insights. That's the research we'll be focusing on. So if anybody wants to join, have more insights, then for sure, always welcome to collaborate. Speaking of valuation, we have a very high visit from the head of valuation of ABN AMRO. So we're going to give him the floor to get his insights on sustainability and, of course, the value of the built environment.
Yeah, thank you.
Please.
Well, I want to take my phone as well, because I want to respond to some earlier speakers, because I'm only just a banker. There were a lot of smart people before me, so I think there's a lot of room for discussion. Well, as I learned 10 minutes ago from Jasmine, we're now living in the neo-classical school of valuation. Well, that's how you put it. I will borrow that from you, and I will spread the news to the whole valuation industry, because I'm convinced nobody is knowing that at the moment. So that's the first of all. Secondly, well, I agree with your point about the green premium and the brown discount. I'm fully agree with you and on the same page, since the green premium will disappear, and that's the most important reason to act now. And that's what I actually tell to all our clients within ABN AMRO. You have to start now, because now there is still a green premium. And within, let's say, 5 or I don't know how many years, there will be only a brown discount, and we will go to stranded assets. So I fully agree with you on that one. And I think there was one other point. To be honest, we're not talking about ESG, and I don't want to make your life so easy. So the most important thing within real estate are 3 things: location, location, and location. And ESG is only one of the 100 factors which is involving the market value. So that's very important to understand, and let's make it very large. So location is and remains the main part of the value of each property. So that started. I'm working at ABN AMRO as I'm having the valuation team, mostly for commercial and corporate real estate. Corporate real estate is real estate own use, but I'm also involved with ABN AMRO Hypotheken Group. We call it AG. And well, that's our largest portfolio which we are having within ABN AMRO. And I'm also involved. I don't know whether if you have heard the news about the climate label. The economists, the head economists of ING, Rabo, and ABN AMRO have launched that 3 weeks ago in some interviews, and I'm part of that working group. Who is working out that way. Well, furthermore, I have to say sorry, because my slides are in Dutch, because I don't simply didn't have the time to translate them into English, but you all can do that yourself, and it gives me a little bit of that you know what the topics are. And this is an AI figure, which is presented by Ines Campus of Sevels, because I was looking for a good first slide. And this is a small sailing boat. And we're sailing out of the harbor. That's how we call it in Dutch. Het bootje moet uit de haven. And it has all to do with, we are talking about this topic for a long time. When I started at ABN AMRO 3.5 years ago, there was a sustainable paragraph 1.0, which was founded and originated by DGWC, Dutch Green Building Council. And the first question was, can we open the window? And that was for me the point I was mentally off, because, well, I didn't see any connection with the market value. Having said that, I thought I can do better. So I started with the whole industry, DUPA 2.0. And that's, of course, because I am a little bit lazy, and duurzaamheidsparagraaf 2.0, it's too long to write that time after time. So that's the reason I called it DUPA 2.0, and now the whole industry is talking about DUPA 2.0. We are sailing out. We have sailed out of the harbor, As a matter of fact, we did that at February the 17th. It's almost 2 months ago, and there was quite a lot of rumors and fuss in the market. And well, this picture shows that are we already in Paris, because we need to go to Paris before 2030. I don't know how we go. Perhaps there is a river in Bulgaria and we go via Bulgaria towards Paris, but we will be there in 2030 in Paris. And this is, well, perhaps this seems like the Eiffel Tower, but we need to go further. So that's the reason there are 2 Eiffel Towers. And of course, it's a very tiny, small sailing boat. So we are dependent on the weather, and there's not room enough on the boat to onboard us all. That's a good starter. Well, for me, it's very important. You need to have your own motivation for ESG, ESG, and sustainability. My children, I have twins of almost 20, and say, well, what are you doing for work? Well, all the bullshit about what you're talking about, just do something for the world. Now, I try to do that for my position at ABN AMRO, because then I can really have some impact in the world. And I think that's a good idea. What we saw with DUPA 1.0 was not good enough, and well, it was only filled in let's say 20% of each value of all the valuation reports, and the main fields were just with a 0 or 1, so they could pass the fields and go further. And there was no intrinsic motivation for them. Besides that, it was only for officers, and there was a lot of resistance in the market. And not to forget, our valuers were not involved. So that was the start. Who are involved with DUPA 2.0? Well, the Dutch Banking Association, ABN AMRO, ING, Rabobank, and the 10 largest valuation firms, Colliers, Sellers, Cushman, Krooswijk, Dynamics, CBRE, JLL, and MVM, and Value PwC. So that's basically 70–80% of the valuation companies for commercial and corporate real estate. Good afternoon. And also the industry organizations such as NVM, VBO, and Vastgoedpro. And of course, we need to integrate that in the valuation software. We have 2 large parties in the Netherlands, Kate and Flux. They need to work with us together. And also SBR Nexus, I'm pretty sure you don't heard of that. It's founded by the 3 main banks, and it's to make it easier for valuers, clients to collect data. And we are not only working for that with valuation, but also for know your customer, rent rolls, and the year reports. So it makes it easier to provide the data. And I get back to that, because this seems a very good idea to also collect the ESG data, because that's the next topic. From who's the data? Because the client is saying, well, it's my data because it's my object. And the valuer saying, it's my data because I made the valuation. And the bank saying, no, it's our data because we do the finance. So that's a very hard discussion. I try to avoid that with DUPA 2.0. Otherwise, the launching date would be somewhere in 2030 or something like that. But it might be a good idea to integrate that in SBR as well, because then we have one place, all the data is there already, and then we can use it. Now, RACF and Tegova are the largest companies, branch in sector industries in Europe. And IVBN is the organization of the Dutch institutional investors, so the large ones such as ASR, Bouwvest, etc. And besides that, not all the valuation companies can have the access towards the information about climate risk and other information about sustainability. So we have 4 providers for that: Blue Module, SafePay, INAX, and Stable. The question is, why did we launch DUPA 2.0? As I said before, you need to have the intrinsic motivation, and that's really helpful. But well, in Dutch, we are saying we have the Bezemwagen. I would translate that in Bromwagen or something like that. I don't know whether that's a well-known sentence, but anyway, it helps a lot to convince the laggards to join as well. We see that, for instance, with the label C label for officers. well, before the date came nearby, a lot of organizations started to do something. So that's really important. Without any legislation from the Netherlands, from Europe, it's very hard to do something. Although it's very hard because in Europe we are one Europe, but we have a lot of legislations and differences. For instance, energy labels. When you in the Netherlands you have an A label, in France it would be a C label at the moment. That's very strange. There will be a harmonization of labels in 2027, but anyway, it's very hard to do so. I also have a role in Europe, within the European Mortgage Federation, and there we are with 20 people out of 15 countries. Well, and are a lot of differences because I speak to my Bulgarian colleague, and they don't even know the word ESG to speak so. But anyway, we have the same legislation in Europe. So that's something we have to take that into account as well. Well, you know all the legislation because previous speakers have said that as well. What's the goal? It looks very simple when it's on the slide. I don't know, it's so boring. Anyway, but the goal is to help valuers that they, when determining the market value, take into account sustainability and ESG and climate risk into the market value. And that's some of the points the two smart ladies were mentioning as well. It's about the value. Of course, you have the price and we have the market value. That's a huge difference. And we're talking about the market. And it's not into the price of the market value. That's the real problem. I have some examples on that as well. We are financing together with another large bank, Rabobank in this case, and it's an office in the city center of Rotterdam, the former V&D office at the Koopgoot. You might know that. And well, there is a tenant, and they need to hire only a Paris-proof building. And that building is Paris-proof, and the renter wants to pay an additional 100 euros per square meter additional because it's Paris-proof. And that's an element of E, but not only of the E, because it's Paris-proof, but also on the S, because the employees are happy to work there. And because they are happy to work there, well, they want to pay more rent. So there was a discussion about E versus G. For me, it's E and S. So it's also the E from environmental and also the S of social. And it can be combined. So it's not or E or S or G, it's all combined. But that's something to discuss also at the roundtable, I think, because it's very important. Because the most, also the people who are very busy with ESG, constantly talking about the E. But in my view, S also for affordable housing, because you have communities. And when you live in a social community, the value of the property will increase. That's something you should be aware of, in my view. Well, what are we asking then? Because now we make it very practical. This presentation is made for valuers. They have the blue color when you compare it together, and so they want to be very practical. We are asking the market value with a special assumption. To have the situation that the building is already sustainabilized. I don't know whether that's a word, but I use it anyway. Towards an A level. And therefore they use CFP, Inox, or one of the other software providers. So let's say you need to do solar panels or alarm pump or etc. And the cost will be, let's say, 1 million. And therefore you get a market value after you refurbish that building towards A label. And that's not a market value, but it's the market value with a special assumption. And then, of course, your question would be, what about the market value? That's the $1 million question, because the market value with a special assumption is very easy to determine, but then you have to take it into account towards the regular market value. And that's the tough part. And we just started, as I said, 2 months ago, and we see a lot of discussions within the market. And that's fine, because I said to the whole market, we did roadshow for about 600-700 valuers. Okay, we don't know it. We don't have all the wisdom, and that was before I was here at TU Delft. But let's start and then discuss with each other. Take the phone, call each other. Okay, this is my problem. What do you think about it? And then we would say we take 6 months at least as a sort of pilot phase. And after that, the market is all aware of what's going to happen, and we can move to the next phase. So that's what we are asking. Secondly, we are asking the actual energy use, because that's, of course, very important for greenhouse gas. And we go from DUPA 2.0 to DUPA 3.0. That will be future-proof, or Paris-proof. So we already started that as well. And the third most important thing is that we are also asking about the climate risk. We all know the earthquake risk in the Netherlands or the flooding risk. As an example, we are financing with ABN AMRO a hotel in Valkenburg aan de Gul. Well, that's nearly at the spot where the flooding was, and there was nothing said in the valuation report. I was a little bit surprised, and of course, I rejected that report. And the same applied for object we financed in Groningen in the middle of the earthquake place. Or that, and then we said, okay, that's Valkenburg and Groningen, but also in Amsterdam, because there are a lot of environments and neighborhoods with the railroad situation. And there was nothing in those reports as well. That surprises me, well, big time, so to speak, because, well, in my view, at least we could expect a capex plan and deduct that from the regular market value. That's not being the case. So there's a lot to learn from our valuers. And then I have bad news for you as well, because it's going about affordable housing. And in general, that market on the valuation side is lagging towards the valuers of commercial real estate. So they have to work on their skills and experience to take that into account. Well, of course, we have a kind of an escape for all valuers, and that's comply or explain. In the Netherlands, we have the NRVT, that is legislation as well. And there you can comply, or if you say, well, I'm not able to do this, it's fine. You put it in the report. And of course, when you do that 50 times or more, and we have an evaluation meeting, you say, well, you have to change that, otherwise you're not over a valuation partner of ABN AMRO. Well, that's basically my presentation. And now we go back to AI, because now you see the end stage. You see we passed already the Eiffel Tower, and we have now a warship, and there is room for every valuer and all owners of the real estate and also of all banks. Together, we are sailing towards DUPA 3.0, and well, that's the situation we all want to say to our valuers and all people involved. We will onboard you and be with us. So that's my presentation. Many thanks for your attention. I think I may have to this.
No, don't worry. What time is it? 2:30. We've got 10 minutes for questions, maybe. So I don't know if there's questions from the audience now or from anybody online. Maybe we can take some questions. Here. But otherwise, we do the coffee break now, and we take the questions after do the debate. Yeah? Shall we go get coffee? Coffee's in the other room.
Okay. Dat klopt. Dat maakt heel lastig. Ik had zelfs de bezig maken.
Oh, heel goed. Ja. Net nog even.
Ja, dat maakt me lastig. Ja. Ik hou ervan.
Nobody got a chance to ask any questions.
I thought it's a bit odd. You told us all those
Nobody gets to.
We're gonna
Oh, yeah.
Welcome to the roundtable session. We'll do a brief presentation of the presenters. We've decided that Rainier will also be joining the roundtable, but he's already introduced himself and you've already heard from him. We'd be very happy to take any questions from the online audience on the chat and any questions from the audience also live, so feel free to raise your hand. And the first presentation is from Fernández.
So the rest is fake.
Yeah, I've been ready for the architect. Now I also do pretty slides. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Alex. Yeah, short presentation. Yeah, so I'm assistant professor here. So in my presentation, I have some questions. Researchers are more comfortable with questions than with exclamation marks. But then this needs to disappear because I put some information there. Yeah. For transparency reasons. So we've been active in social housing for 30 years. So I have also other functions within social housing. And one of these functions is being supervisory board member of housing associations, 2 of them. So there's also kind of skin in the game professionally for me about this discussion about social housing and social housing finance. For example, Rochdale is one of the housing associations I'm supervisory board member of, is planning to invest 2.3 billion euros in new housing construction and sustainability. So that's a lot of money. So all these discussions, also I hear about the value of, so it makes me a bit nervous what the impact will be. But it's also good to know. So in Delft here, we also often partly involved in practice and partly in academics. So we are pracademics, you could say.
academics.
Yeah. So Jasmine went back, I think, 200 years before Christ, I think, in your story. So I'm going back 500 years to Sir Thomas Gresham. I'm not sure if you heard of Sir Thomas Gresham. He was an advisor to Queen Elizabeth I, and he developed his own law that bad money drives out good money. And this was in the time of coins, so that counterfeit coins were more in circulation than the real ones, because people use the real ones for themselves, to save or to support their family or their kids, or invest in castles or homes, but not in transactions. So I was thinking, is this law of bad money driving out good money still valid? And could ESG finance help to drive out the bad money and increase the supply of good money? And what would that look like if you transform that to housing? I'm not sure. So these are a lot of question marks in here. But is that, could say that housing associations often have good money because you have this guarantee fund, but is there also bad money in housing? I do think so, like the predatory house landlords, predatory lending, tenant insecurity, minimal housing quality standards. So maybe it's a question mark, as I said, but it's maybe interesting to see if there's kind of potential to increase the amount of money and drive out bad money. But maybe this is only, it's not something that's valid, because to the round of my presentation, this famous guy said there's not such a thing as good money or bad money. But he was also the boss of the modern crime syndicate in the US. And he was lucky because he was sentenced to 50 years in prison and was released after 20. Okay, so that's my introduction. Thank you.
Next up, we have Annie.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, I don't go back in the history. I was thinking, well, let's say a little bit about what we are doing on ESG at ADES. I work as an interim for ADES, and together with my colleague Marcel, we are working on the ESG project. Why did we start it in the beginning? As some of you might know, housing associations in the Netherlands are not obliged to provide an ESG report. So, part actually a result of the lobby of ADES, because for housing associations it's very important to keep the administrative burden as low as possible to avoid a lot of costs coming to the accounting firms, etc. Because that money can better be spent on the social housing. On the other hand, we see that banks are going to have the obligation to do the ESG report. So you can imagine that they are going to ask some information of the housing association that they have to provide for the funding. Although they are not don't have the obligation, we also see mostly under the bigger housing associations the wish to make the ESG report, just to showcase a little bit more what they do on especially the E side, but also the S part. On the G part, a lot of things are already prescribed in law and legislation, and you have to do it in your yearly account. So that's maybe not something, a very big thing they are now working on. What we saw on the other side was that a lot of commercial firms, like advisory firms, accounting firms, try to make a business out of it. So they are approaching the housing associations to say, we can help you with that. Well, it's the same question for every housing association. So if everybody does individually, it costs a lot of money, and again, it can better be spent on other things. So that's why we thought it was very important to make a framework of indicators that housing associations can use if they want to, can use for an ESG report. We spoke to a lot of housing associations about this topic, and one of them I thought was really nice was Eigen Haard in Amsterdam. They said we also do it because we want to learn from it, to see what kind of processes can we improve and get better on. So I thought that was also a nice perspective on it. So our goal is actually to make that uniform framework, but we must not forget the funding side, the investment side. So that's why we work together with the WSW, Guarantee Fund, because they are in daily contact with the banks who finance the social housing investments. So we thought it's very important to see what is their information needs, what do they need to collect, and how can we combine it with the indicators that housing associations themselves want to collect and report on. So that's why our goal is to provide a uniform answer to the indicators, the frame of indicators. What do you want to report on, and especially why do you want to report it? So what is relevant to report on, and combine that with, does it also apply to the banks? Can we fulfill their need actually for information? And that we're going to bring together in a framework. Like I said before, some of them are very important for our project. We are in the beginning of it, so we don't have results yet. We are working to get the results. Like I said, it's very important to keep the administrative expenses as low as possible. Within ADES, we are the Organization of Housing Associations in the Netherlands. We also have another project, which is Marcel doing, that is called Regeldruk. There are a lot of things that housing associations need to do administrative-wise. Costs a lot of money, so that's why we keep it as low as possible. And we also thought it's very important to check the definitions. If we have an indicator, what is the definition? And is that something that we can use for the whole sector? Our focus is, that's also good to know, also for the round table discussion, our focus is social housing in the Netherlands. What we also thought, we tried to make a basis, because you also have, although housing associations are quite similar, they also think very special, everybody thinks they're very special, so we create a basic and then you can add extra indicators if you want to. And we look as well as to the quantitative side as to the qualitative side. We already found out that some indicators are very well to provide them with quantitative data, otherwise more like a narrative. You have to describe what you are doing. So that's the other part. Might be a bit more difficult to make that into a uniform framework, but we try to do it. And our role at ADIS is to connect with the housing associations, work together to get it. And DSW is taking the lead in the role of the banks. Where do we stand now? Well, we at the beginning of this year, I think it was in January, we sent out a mailing to all the housing associations that are member. Almost every housing association is a member. With a call to action, do you want to think with us how that framework should look like and how are we going to develop that? We got quite a big response. 26 housing associations said, oh yeah, we want to work on that one with you. That is apart from another group called De Vernieuwde Stad. That's like collaborative forum for the bigger housing associations. They're also working on an ESG report framework. So we also try to combine that and work together. And in the meantime, we are also staying in touch with a lot of other organizations who are working on this subject. DSW already mentioned that one. The Dutch Green Building Council, very important one. A lot of knowledge, but not so much already about the social sector, but more about the building sector and development sector. But that's very valuable knowledge that we can use as well. De Vernieuwde Stad already mentioned that, but also Housing Europe. Because we thought, well, it's actually coming from the EU taxonomy, so we thought it's the EU. So let's try and ask Housing Europe, are there other countries which are far more ahead of us making the ESG framework? Well, unfortunately, no. So they were very happy that we took the initiative, but there was not much to learn from other countries yet. Although we found out that in France, they are also doing a lot of good work. So we try to talk to them and see what we can learn from that. And besides that, there are a lot of advisors. So that's what we do at ADIS, and try to combine it in the round table. Alex, there you go.
From ABN AMRO.
Thank you. Yes, thanks. So when I look at the picture, I think we are going back in time a bit. It seems to be 10 years ago, something like that. Well, I don't think that changed too much. Depends a bit what season of the year you look at me, but we're going in swim trunks now in the summer, so. Yes, I work at ABN AMRO. I've been doing that for about 25 years, almost 25 years. Did a lot of things, SME banking, corporate banking, worked at the risk department, and at the real estate department for the last 10 years. The real estate department covers clients that are active in commercial real estate, but also residential, buy-to-let, and also project developers. I'm currently a coverage banker in the large accounts team, which we serve at the top of the market, bigger clients in the Netherlands. You might wonder what a coverage banker does, perhaps. Well, the bank has products on one side, and my clients have needs, and I try to match the two. And it's quite easy. The only thing I have to do is get everyone internally within the bank to perform at the right time so that we can do fantastic things for our clients. So it's quite an easy job, a lot of fun also. So I hope to be doing this for many more years. I think that's enough about me. As ABN AMRO at the grounds, I don't think I'm going to introduce. go through all points, but we focus on the northwestern European market. The real estate department has a special focus on the Netherlands. We do some things abroad, Germany, for example. We have a lot of clients, as you can see, well, they're around there somewhere. But I think the most important thing are the two center blocks. On your right, my left, you see that on our balance sheet there are 260 billion amount of loans. 60%-70% of that is invested into real estate, mostly mortgages for our retail clients, but also commercial real estate. That's about 16-17 billion. The other block, wealth management, 202 billion euros, is the money that money stock bonds that our clients keep at ABN AMRO. Yeah, these two things are really important because if we as ABN AMRO can make a shift, a small shift towards more ESG friendly investments, we can have a major impact. And so that's what we're trying to do every day. And I think that's also something does anyone know the purpose of ABN AMRO Bank? Yeah, you probably know it maybe. But it's banking for better for generations to come. And so I think there's a lot of ESG in there. So that's what we're really trying to, all of us are trying to do. How do we do that? Well, we named a couple of focus themes. I'm not going to go through all of them because I'd be here the entire afternoon. But I picked two. One is climate change and the other is social impact, because they are probably most relevant for today. On the top right, left view, sorry, making real estate more sustainable. We are trying to help our clients improve the sustainability of all their real estate. We help them with making a roadmap towards sustainability. We help them with subsidy advice. We help with financing. So we really try to help our clients make the next step. Sustainable financing, that's something which is more broad across all sectors the bank is financing. It's not really relevant. Green bonds, cheaper funding for our clients, and ESG investing. That's the part, the 202 billion that we try to that our clients can invest. We do that by making ESG investing and impact financing the default choice. And so if you want to buy stock, the first thing you see is ESG friendly stock. Some of the KPIs below, if they're really very relevant. That's the targets, I think, for this year. ESG and impact investing, we already reached that level last year. So I think we're doing quite well. One important thing is sustainable real estate, the 32% reduction of carbon footprint. That's a major shift. And I think what right here, the 2.0 is really going to help us achieve this because we can quantify it with our clients to see what's the impact if you make your real estate more sustainable. So that's really going to help. So thanks again. A social impact. I thought it was nice to mention this because I think the S is different for each company. So this really shows that. For the bank, it's the S. It's important to keep everyone aboard. So leave no one behind. You probably noticed, but if you go to a city, there used to be a banking office on every corner of every street. I think when I started 20 years ago, we had 9 offices in Nijmegen, where I come from. And there's only one there now. So that means that there's a massive shift going on to online. But there are also elderly who kind of find it difficult to bank online. And so there's a phone line to help them. There are people that go to elderly at home and help them with online banking. Equal opportunities, of course, very important. There was some research done that female entrepreneurs find it very difficult to attain financing when they have a company. So there's a special team that helps them to achieve this. Also, I think a good example of helping our clients and creating social impact. And financial resilience, also an important topic. There are quite a few people that are in financial difficulties, and there are, I think, at the moment 150 budget coaches that help clients that are in trouble sort out their finances. And also, I think, a beautiful example of making impact. So yeah, that's probably one more I can tell. And I really think, I think it makes me proud to work in a room and do these kind of things. So happy to be here.
Latest addition.
Thanks, Alec.
Thank you.
So I'm Anita Blessing. I've been working in social housing policy research for a long time, and I'm really here today speaking from my role with the European Federation for Living, where I'm supporting all this knowledge exchange that is going on there. How do I get the slides on? Oh, easy. The European Federation for Living is a partner of, industry partner of some of this research. It's a network of around 70 different companies around Europe, mainly social housing providers, also consultancies in the built environment, educational institutions like our partner here. And we're all about knowledge exchange and collaboration. And I suppose with this short presentation, I just want to introduce you to some of the work that relates to this session today. So inside our network, we've just put out a report on social impact measurement by social housing providers. So just to underline that, as Annika pointed out, there's pressure coming indirectly, to justify your outcomes to residents, of course, but also to lenders, to regulators. So social housing providers are under a lot of pressure to calculate their social and other impacts. And with this report, we found that all these providers around Europe are, we actually looked at England, France, Ireland, Italy, Northern Ireland. Our Italian member, Fondazione Housing Sociale, did this study. And we found that a lot of work's being put into this, but there are all these different systems all around Europe. And I guess everyone's quite confused about what the S in ESG actually is. It's different to everybody. It's calculated differently. In our group, there's also, within the European Federation for Living, there's a finance topic group that's really active. And I think it's an important space to, for sort of trust building between investors and social housing providers. They're really learning about each other's needs. There's been an important product that's come out of that spearheaded by Ritterwald, which is an international consultancy, and we have Ad Hirakis, the Director of Business Development here, I noticed. So they've produced a label that helps connect finance with social housing projects. The label refers to the sustainability of a company, and it's based on an annual reaccreditation system. But just to underline, there's a lot of talking in this network so a current project with this topic group is mapping the data needs around financing housing decarbonisation. So within the European Federation for Living, there's a lot of interest in the green taxonomy, but also we're wondering why the social taxonomy didn't work out. Why has this been packed up? We were hoping that it would be a nice double line, to say, well, this is a social and this is a green project. So there are question marks about that. So we do a lot of collaboration with our academic partners as well. And I guess just to touch on some of my own personal interests, this is research done sort of 5 or 6 years ago. We looked outside Europe and at other examples of of affordable housing finance. We looked at the US, and we looked at a very well-established regulation that asks banks to invest in affordable housing and other social pursuits. And we really thought about the organizational impact over time of regulations driving change, and saw that there was a lot of organizational hybridization going on, so that banks, compelled by regulation to make ESG type investments, actually get in-house expertise. They develop their own departments that have knowledge of neighborhoods and social affordable housing companies and so forth. We saw affordable housing companies get more professional. And so a lot of changes, and it just raises some questions that are important for this event that Alex also looks at, which is as these new regulations kick in Europe, where is the onus? Who has sort of the burden for reporting? It can be very heavy on social housing providers who are really about building affordable housing, which is hard. And it's an important question. Who has to establish what? And how are, basically who reports, who assesses? In the US, it's actually affordable housing providers that assess whether the bank has established they've done enough. Otherwise, they raise an objection, right? This is something I'm not going to go into, but this is, I think, where I'll stop. But just to highlight all of the organizational adaptations under regulation are really important for our industry as well. So yes, I better join. Sorry.
Well, Penny, you'd like to join us too?
Oh, yeah. It's fine. I'm happy standing.
No, I'm not doing it. Okay. Oh yeah, sitting down for like an hour.
No hands.
Right. So thank you very much and welcome. Just for the audience to know, it's interactive. So if you have any questions or you want to join in, then just get involved. That's the whole idea. We're not that many. Also online, there will be some moderation going on. So let's kick off. And actually, let's kick off with the last slide we've seen. And are the definitions of sustainability, especially when it comes down to social aspects, apparent? And I think that's an important one, as we already get the mention of the audience. There's a lot of going on the environmental taxonomy, but social taxonomy is lacking. And in the case of affordability, which is still under social in some way, are they apparent? Is there some insights on that one? And well, as you mentioned it to start with, I'm going to give Anita the first round to this question.
Okay, so you're going to need to rephrase that again. So what is talking about the S?
Yeah, the S of social.
Yeah.
Is there a definition for that?
You know, and again, so I'm not a finance expert, despite being at a round table, but I think it's not clear cut what the social is. Maybe it is in the European framework, but it's not clear cut for social housing providers. And I think, say, the green taxonomy and the framework are not going to have investment flow automatically into the S part of it. The S is sometimes seen as in conflict with the G and the E. And there are concerns about, I think, amongst lenders, understandably, about issues like social cohesion in social housing. And I think lenders want to know about that stuff too.
Is that affordability the conflict?
The conflict around knowing what the S is in social.
Yeah.
Well, I think that when you come into affordable housing, understandably, to lenders who are worried about profit margins, worry about things like rent defaults. So I don't know whether affordability is a conflict there, but affordable housing is different from other housing, I think, to invest in, understandably.
Maybe you can, from a banking perspective, look at that.
I agree. When we look at financing at the moment, a couple of years ago, I think loan to value was the constraining factor. But that's not the case any longer because the interest rates have gone up. It's always about being able to pay your debt service. So if there's less income, it's harder to finance at the same level. So of course that's an issue. But I don't think it has anything to do with the S. It's just that we loan people money and we need to get it back at some point in time, and that can only be achieved if there's enough income.
Yeah, but then if you look at EU taxonomy, for instance, which is not applicable to housing corporations, but it is so in some way connected all together, then you can argue that the prices go up. And from that, it becomes less affordable. I don't know if Edith has some insights on that one.
Yeah, I think in the Netherlands it's quite strict. What is affordability? What can the rents be? How much can you increase rent every year? So I think that's pretty much described. I think in the Netherlands it's more about is the S bigger than just affordability? Does it also go about the livability in the neighborhoods, the inclusiveness in the neighborhoods, that kind of thing? And I think that is something to explore. That's not clear yet. But what is affordable? What are the rents that you can ask? That's quite prescribed, actually.
Okay.
I think it might be, well, for all the equal classes, it's very difficult at the moment. I was thinking, am I going to say that for the lower income, for the social housing, it's difficult to get a house, but also for the medium income. So,
yeah, for sure. So, well, loan to value, it's an interesting concept, still applicable somehow. Maybe it's not that important, but then of course we get to value, and then we get to Reinier. Are you then taking into your taxation today, and within the duurzaamheid paragraph 2.0, the sustainability paragraph 2.0, I have to state, are you already taking into account social in some perspective?
Well, I want to get back to your presentation in front because of it was about the sustainable development goals, and it's just that we all speak the same language. So that was the starting point, let's say 5 to 7 years ago. Well, now everybody knows the SDGs by that. I do, for instance. So now we all talk the same language. And that's also a question of definition. ESG is only to help to speak the same language. So for me, it's not very important because it's depending what topic you're talking about, affordability, but you have also perspective from an institutional investor. So that's one. Secondly, no. It's not yet converted into the market value social, of not enough. And the example I gave earlier about the office building in Rotterdam, it's very clear. But is that only social, or is it E and S and or G? And basically, I don't care whether it's E, S, or G. I want to have, and that was the definition of market value and ESG, sustainability and climate risk. And it was on purpose, those three together. Those factors all should be priced into the market value. And that's not being the case because we need to change our valuers to adapt this vision. So it will take about 2 or 3 years at least when it's fully adapted into the market value.
Okay. Well, you emphasize on market value, which in my perspective is very interesting from a housing market in the Netherlands, which is very regulated from a rent perspective, very regulated from a financing perspective, also from a legislative perspective. Can you still argue that it's a free market, that it's a market at all? Gerard, maybe you want to get into that one.
Yeah, but I would like to react on the first question.
Oh, yeah, please do.
So I was thinking about the discussion about the S in ESG. So what would our tenants think about our discussion? Will they notice anything about this system world discussion? Because they need good houses in livable neighborhoods. That's the main point. And the mandate of social housing providers is different from country to country and also differs in time. So housing associations in the Netherlands had a far broader mandate 15 years ago than they have now. So this is also dynamic and it's different. So why would you put a lot of effort in finding a unified definition of what social is? What would the life world of our tenants notice of that discussion? Maybe that contributing to the first question. The second question, housing markets are.
Wait.
Yeah,
Sorry to react on that one.
Yeah, okay.
Because I'm a layman from a housing corporation point of view, so I'm a bit confused. Well, why do you want the definition? Isn't like institutional investors are international, and they all need to report. So I can imagine, I know something from a financial perspective, so I can imagine that if I want to invest and I want to be social good, do social good, then I somehow need to compare my different investment possibilities across countries. So that's why I would like to have a uniform definition so that I don't get accidentally into a social washing incident where I think I'm doing good, but actually I'm not. So I think that's an important factor, no?
Yeah, maybe from a very broad perspective, when I look at social housing in the Netherlands, you have two main providers of finance for social housing. Okay. These are Dutch state-related banks. I think they provide 90, not sure how much they provide.
95%.
Exactly, yeah. So BNG and the Dutch Waterboard Bank. All other banks, also ABN and AMRO, have a very limited part in the social housing sector. I would hope that it increases. It's also with mid-segment housing. So maybe
we're still a little bit of a state bank. So
sorry for that. Yeah, exactly. That's a different story, I think.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
It's more of a.
But maybe if I can add to what Gerard said about what is important for our tenants. Actually, that is, I had a presentation last Wednesday. We were working on a portfolio plan for a housing association. We invited the municipality and the tenants organization and from the care. And we asked them, what is important to you? And then we had a presentation from Circus Vis. I don't know how to...
Circus Vis,
That's the name of a consultancy firm. And they did an analysis. They also did a bigger one for ADES called the Veerkrachtkaarten. It's going about what is the livability in the neighborhoods. And they found out that if you zoom in on some neighborhoods where it's large amount of social housing, that is correlated to how long do people live, like being healthy, that if you are in an area with a lot of social housing, you live, I don't know, by 14 years shorter than in an area with less social housing, like the feeling of safety, all those things. So I think that's the biggest challenge actually, and that is what the S should be about if you're a housing organization.
Yeah, but that can do, in my opinion, ADES can do a real great job here because, you need to build communities, social communities, and then there is a warm social environment, and then people feel extremely safe. So I was in South Africa, in Cape Town, in one of the shoot-downs. And they all said, it's very unsafe, but I felt never more safe than in that area because it is a huge community feeling. So, and that's what ADES and all the housing corporations in the Netherlands should aim for.
Yeah, that's true. That's the biggest.
So it's very easy to say, of course, it's not safe. So, you live 10 to 15 years shorter. Fix it. Because that's one of the main tasks of the social housing companies in the Netherlands, in my opinion.
Yeah, it is. But I think that is the biggest challenge, actually. And if you're thinking about this, actually.
So creating the community is the biggest challenge.
Well, for example, but to reduce... But to increase actually the livability and I think that's the biggest one.
So could we then argue that from a banking perspective, coming back to you, that actually ESG would drive a bank towards more social investments and well, taking maybe the place of those big banks?
I think, speaking for ABN AMRO, we can't finance everything, so we have to choose what we finance.
Yeah.
And if you have two projects you can finance and one scores better on ESG, I'm going to choose the ESG project.
Yeah.
Of course, what you said is all true, but it's only, I think, one side of the coin. You always talk about the assets and everything. There's also the liability side of it, the balance sheet there, and that's where the equity is in place, the loans the banks are providing. But that's also very important if you want to be able to fulfill all the tasks that you have. So you will have to also spend effort on that side as well and provide banks with the information they need in order for them to finance you at a higher level and to be able to calculate the risk the banks are taking when financing. I don't think there are many risks, but
No, but that's
so it's you have to pay attention to both sides of the coin.
But from a banking perspective, and I'm going to hit that nail again. Sorry for that. That's why it's a debate. I would argue, well, if today those social constructs or the social places are worth less, then that's a growth market. Because if we invest in creating communities, then it will be a more livable place. Because it's a more livable place, prices will go up, and so it becomes a more expensive neighborhood. So actually, your risk is getting lower because loan to value.
The same goes for every asset type we finance.
Okay.
It's also for mid-market. If you invest in the community, the neighborhood turns better. And so I don't think that's a driver for the bank.
Okay. So then I come back to the free market discussion. Is it actually the housing market, a free market? And well, it's observable, that's clear, but it's also free.
Yeah. Sorry for going back to this question. But you could say, what defines a market? I think one of the characteristics of a market is that supply and demand follow each other. Well, I think the housing market doesn't really comply with that requirement, especially in the Netherlands, no? And there's almost no link to supply between supply and demand. That's why you see huge house prices, waiting lists of 10 to 15 years of social housing, huge agency costs for people to move from one house to the other. So there are all kinds of elements that make the housing market very, very, very imperfect market.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does that answer your question?
It answers the question for sure. I read last night actually that Utrecht now has the huisvestingsvergunning, so for mid-segment even. So now if you want to buy a mid-segment house, then actually you need a permit for that. You have to prove that your income is not higher than, I don't remember, 63,000 euros on an annual basis. So is that then also a way to not only, well, to take off the free market and make it also more imperfect?
Free market is just an ideal, and housing is always social and commercial. It's like two sides of a coin you can't separate. So yeah, you cannot it's not a free market. It will always have rules. But yes, I suppose what you're asking, are the regulations too much? Is it over-regulated? Is it?
For sure. Well, yeah. Well, in this case, I think supply and demand is driving a free market. In this case, you're going to limit supply by having, well, only limited access to the market.
Doesn't change.
Well, yes. Well, demand. So you're limiting demand. That's the good thing.
Yeah.
So supply, so you're limiting demand.
You're distributing scarcity.
Yeah, so you're not solving the problem. You're only.
You limit people who can apply for.
For housing, we seem to accept it if something like this happens. But if the government told you that you could only buy a Mercedes, or you had to buy a Mercedes if you earn more than 80,000 euros, I think everyone would go crazy. Why do we accept this? And if I draw a comparison to the commercial real estate market, which isn't regulated, which market functions better?
That's a good question. Which market does function better? Renier.
For me, it's quite easy. That's the commercial and corporate real estate sector.
Okay. Then why is this intervention necessary? Or why is Utrecht deciding on that?
Well, intervention is necessary because people can't get a house, and then it also becomes politically untenable. There's the suffering side, but I think what we're seeing is that with regulation and constraint, you also have to have an answer to supply. When you try to regulate demand, you have to have a supply answer. And our supply answer, well, in this country, is still linked very much to demand because, of course, it's a market. So I think we didn't see the supply side addressed enough.
Well, that's also something that Peter Boelhouwer is already saying for at least 1 year, the year that I'm here. But I can imagine that that's already something he's been saying for many years.
What does it say?
That there's a shortage on houses on the market. That's for sure.
So to be a professor to.
The supply side is for sure something that's getting in there. So I think that's interesting. You want to react?
Yeah, it was correct. You promised. Okay. I would like to add to this question, which market functions better? And then you said, well, it's the commercial market. And then why do we interfere with the social market? I would like to refer to my introduction, and I think it's interesting to see. I mean, over the years, housing is a human right. It is in the constitutions of many countries that people have access to a community. And I think it's very interesting this role OECD played in looking for the perfect market. That was on top of the agenda the last decades. And now this brick by brick report is about how can we do best? It's not an option. I mean, it's not possible to make this lower end of the market function like the top end.
You have to solve it by more regulation, or could the government just say, we're going to build these houses?
That's the point. I mean, my message is, you cannot copy it, but the challenge now that OECD is referring to how to build the best housing policies.
Yeah.
So we need to rethink. I mean, it's maybe not regulation, or it's a combination of an incentive of new funding. So the floor is open for new ideas, new exchanges. Yeah.
Of course, we all have an opinion about our Minister Hugo de Jonge. Some people start to get laughing, but let's go back to the 60s. There was another minister. He only sat there for 2 or 3 years, and he built a huge amount of new houses. And that was basically a very good plan. And he was also, they were not quite happy with him. There's a documentary which probably you might have seen. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's him. Yeah,
exactly.
His wife was
it's a perfect example of how we can do that in a country. But of course, it's what you are saying it's a right to have a personal house, and that's the reason it's very important. And to be honest, it's much more important than commercial real estate because it has no social impact, and that's the whole thing. So we need to try. And of course, we need the government with legislation, but it has to be a good combination with the market. Everyone has to be on the table. We have Nicole Marce, she's playing a huge role in that, and she's the best to do that. So you need people like that, and it's not very easy that we solve it here. And there's lots of emotion in that, but it's a right for people to have a good, affordable house. But yeah, of course, it's a combination of legislation on the one hand, and on the other hand, the market should also adjust. And in my view, the winning combination will be that the local government is not selling grounds as a business model, because that's the real differentiator. Because if there is a lower price for the ground, in this case, we can all make business cases from developers, builders, and then we can change it a little bit. But that's, of course, because very difficult as well, because it's a money machine for the municipalities.
Yeah, but I think what I was telling about the Redwell project with the different disciplines, I think this challenge is not only for the government. I mean, it's also for the real estate sector. It's about new business models. It's about types of building, types of dwellings, sharing places, land policy of the government. So I think when you see all the disciplines together, that.
And don't forget flex houses, because they're very short term to the market, especially in Limburg and Groningen, because the demand will decrease a lot the coming years, so you can have a short time to market. So it's a multiple solutions which you should combine.
Okay, Alex, you want to react?
Yeah, I wanted to add to this discussion on the state intervention. We look at home ownership, for example. This country continues to over-subsidize home ownership directly by undertaxing it. So the idea of a free market, it's sort of non-existent. We look at it from how value is created, and that is through under-taxation. I was very interested on what Rania pointed out, and maybe it ties onto different models of financing social housing, because we are saying, there's new rules for state aid that allow for grant funding towards social housing. We have been under-taxing home ownership. Shouldn't we be looking at let's say, a reassessment of priorities in terms of government intervention? And in your view, how that would look like? No, not only talking about the role of private finance and ESG, but maybe going into other modes of state intervention? And I'm throwing it to the panel.
Oh yeah, can I respond to that? Yeah, because indeed you're correct. We are stimulating, could say, demand by supporting home ownership. We are also supporting social housing with state guarantees and housing allowances. We're not supporting the mid segment in any way. So if we should work to a more equitable support from the government, not supporting one segment or the other more than the other.
But it will be a challenge, because if you want to get the home ownership less subsidized, you need the political parties to go for that, and nobody dares to do that. So then you're gone next time.
But also, let's be practical from the real estate market, because a lot of young people, they don't need a kitchen anymore because they don't cook at all. But they do now, but that's how it is. And on the other hand, people need 2 working rooms because we have now hybrid working. So we have to develop new kind of houses, and perhaps, they're more on the street and in the city, and work and private will go exactly. And that means that perhaps we can go back from 60 square meters to 40 square meters. So we have to be innovative to make new concepts and sit together with all people and stakeholders from the whole market. And then I'm pretty sure we will arrange the solution then. But if we don't do such a thing, we cannot solve it.
Well, sorry, yeah.
Oh, and just, it's important what you said about home ownership and not being able to, attack that in any way. But it's interesting, in this country, there doesn't seem to be any attention to any other form of saving. That I can really see. There's a massive gender disparity in pension savings in all Western countries, and there doesn't seem to be any attention to that. That was the only point.
There is attention for that. Last week I had the interview with Gert-Jan van der Baan from Versteda in my podcast. And he's also open to invest more in social housing. So I'm really open to that. But of course,
I don't think money is the problem.
Exactly.
That's not the issue. I think there's more than enough money to finance social housing.
But
there's other things.
It's about
building costs. It's people that are going to build the units, places to build them.
No connection.
Zoning,
no connection to the grid. Last day in the newspaper was no connection to water, etc., etc.
But there are quite a few problems to solve before.
So then, big infrastructure projects will actually kind of solve the supply crisis within housing.
part of the solution, perhaps.
There is as an example, so in LA now, you can, if you build 100% affordable housing, you don't have to comply with any public consultation process. You just get planning permission. You don't have to comply with very high environmental standards. You can just do the basics. And the number of projects developing affordable housing by private for-profit developers is at this all-time high. So
Is it any good though?
Yeah, it depends on the end results. What kind of homes are they producing?
They can just be doing it for a year. We don't know.
And you have to
Urban
think,
areas in the future.
and you have to think outside the box, because why should developers start this process? For me, it starts with the community, because you have 200 people and they go to the municipality, say, well, we are with 200 people and we need a house. Yeah, let's do it ourselves.
But how many housing cooperatives is ABN AMRO supporting with finance?
How many are there?
Well, that's kind of chicken and egg. Eh?
We're talking to.
We're open to that.
Yeah.
So we're at the table with the initiatives on a daily basis.
Yeah, but often they need to go to Germany to find a mortgage to finance their projects. Eh?
That's true.
Yeah.
We also have work to do.
Yeah, no, but that's great. Yeah, that you're working.
But also for the guarantee funds.
Exactly.
They are not open. I mean, you have
It's the old check.
WSW, they are open, yeah, and the WEW doesn't guarantee to co-ops.
So then will sustainability reporting, which has certain criteria, also from an SFDR point of view, CSRD point of view, will actually make these things more apparent. We'll actually say, okay, dear bank, dear finance, dear investor, you're not investing enough into social for whatever area you're serving. And is there then a tension between the need to report and, will actually those reporting lead to more investments into the social sector?
Yes, maybe, but it's not clear cut. Exactly. I think it's just interesting to look at the hesitation to spell out at a European level, for example, through a taxonomy or whatever, what is a social investment. And it's partly a political question too, that I think it's interesting there was no one on that group from a housing background, I thought. But it's a political issue that housing is seen as a right. And for that reason, not everybody thinks that the way to go is to build a social taxonomy, is to focus on private investment. So it's, it has a sort of social should be foundational, but there is some sort of political aspect that interferes, I think, with. It's very touchy.
Yeah, for sure. The project on the social taxonomy was put to rest in 2022 because they were creating a social taxonomy. There's been a lot of research on that one, and in February 2022, the Commission said, what they actually said was, we're never going to solve this, so we leave it up to the member state to decide what social is. So we stopped creating social taxonomies. Now there's a lot of question about those social taxonomies, and I do get that it's very local. So from creating something definitional social housing or even affordability on a European level isn't easy to do. But then, is there a need within the Netherlands to create a social taxonomy or some kind of taxonomy specifically for social housing or for housing to keep this affordable? Would that actually help? And would that regulate the market better than it does today?
I don't think so. Let me think about it a little longer. I don't think it will change much if affordability, like I said, it's very strict what is affordability, so it's not going to change any of that. I don't think housing associations are going to operate in a different way. I think they're already trying to do as much as they can on the social part. So Maybe, Gerard, you look at it in a different.
Now, maybe linking to the G of ESG is that housing associations could be more inclusive in their activities linking to the social aspect. So incorporating stakeholders more, making well, they already do their performance agreements with local authorities, but including more things like livability and health and care in these performance agreements. But that will not affect affordability because that you could say is very regulated and also I think well.
That you mentioned the G, I have a governance question on that one. If I understood correctly, once you're in a social housing, it's for life if you want to. So I can imagine that there's a run to get into a social housing or affordable housing as fast as possible. And then whatever happens afterwards, well, that's quite okay. Huh? So could there be a solution in freeing up social units throughout the country?
I think it would be a solution, but you have to make sure that there's enough supply where you're going to send people. Yeah, that's the problem.
To Heerlen.
To Heerlen, that's one place, some place that.
It's also already the case that a lot of young people do not have the same rights as say elderly households. They get a temporary contract, and it also creates a lot of insecurity. And they know they have to leave after 5 years, and they are where to go. So tenant security is, I think, a very important value in the Netherlands.
Well, so I'm going to be bold here, not literally. Not literally.
Now we can share that.
Yeah, we can share that one.
I'm in a club.
So if your wages are higher, if you get paid more to do your job, then it's your problem. You can solve your own problems. That's actually what I'm hearing. So if you earn less, then you get a house and we have to take care of you because poor little you. But if you earn more, then just solve your own problem. And well, if there's no supply left, then please leave the country. Can I summarize that as that? Or is that?
I think it's interesting thought actually.
Interesting in the Dutch way because that's not
interesting in the Dutch way. No, but what you can do now at the moment is a tenant has a higher income. You can give them a higher rental increase year by year, but you don't want them all kicked out of those houses because it's nice for the diversity in your neighborhood to have also higher income people and not only the very lower income people, very vulnerable people. So that's the other aspect.
Yeah, it's very important. Just today, so the Social Cultural Planbureau, not sure how to translate that quickly, presented a report that the poor and the rich are very living separated, even more than in the past. So mixing incomes in a neighborhood is also very important and not separating them. And indeed, you have instruments like income-related rent increases that you can apply to also have a more fair link between the rent you pay and the income you have. But it's controversial.
I would say increase the supply. Yeah, that's the real solution.
Yes, of course.
Because in a way we call it scheefwonen is not good at all. And of course it's good to integrate mixed incomes and things like that, but the key is more supply, then you can do it in the same environment.
I think we all agree.
But then
so we should focus on that.
Extra supply in general, because before the woningbed, there was no really like an income restriction to get in a social house. So after the woningbed was introduced with als toewijs, I don't know how to translate that one. It was restricted what your income is to get a social house. So that also adds to that segmentation.
Yeah, and it's very difficult because in the larger city of the Netherlands for the social housing companies, they need to have approval of 70% of the tenants.
Or renovations.
Exactly.
Renovation, yeah.
Yeah, well, and that's also not helping because, well, if they don't get the approval, they cannot, well, extend or top up the buildings, for instance. So well, that's also a clue because if we go from 30 to 70 apartments at the same location, we're increasing supply.
Yeah, or you don't need the 70% if you top up. You
I
need,
know.
yeah,
Okay.
you need the 70% if you go
I thought I'd keep it simple, but
but you know, it is a problem. So the whole participation, I think we have to revisit that.
Yeah.
So how do you increase the quality of participation of stakeholders? On the other hand, make sure that you don't have all these legal procedures until the Raad van State.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just go as we can do in LA, as you just heard.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the result is something. Maybe we're creating.
Well, I like the idea anyway.
Do away with all of that, and just like
We often use the 1 million homes project in Sweden as something you should not repeat. And also in the Netherlands, we have the examples because you can build, and build problem areas of the future. So we have to keep thinking about what we're going to build.
No, but you can do that, although you have to do it with flex apartments or buildings because you can pick them up. It's also circular, and then you can pick them up at a certain point and move them towards another.
So that's part of the solution. Yeah.
You don't have to do it all in one place. Staantje Bij was quite a good idea. If you add a couple of streets in every town, you can add quite a bit of supply.
Yeah, but then you also have to think about the amenities and how.
But they're already there. You're only adding one street and then already a sustainable environment. But there are amenities and stuff like that. So
The local ecosystem.
Yeah, well, exactly. That's the future.
There are also a lot of developments like that around the world, though, where people plan to move them on in 10 years, but there's still people living in them 50 years later, you know, in houses that were meant to be temporary because things get harder. And then those plans are great, but they don't always work.
Well, what you also tend to read a lot is that grants and government intervention, subsidies, well, lead to some kind of Matthäus effect, where the rich get wealthier and the poor get poorer. So if you say, yes, supply has to kick off, well, you have to somehow set the market on fire. Probably some kind of subsidy regulation grant regulation will come in place. But then will that actually, like in LA, will that actually lead to, well, the effect you want to realize? Or is it only, well, temporary, a band-aid on the boo-boo, and then, well, things will get the same again? Sure, I see you thinking, and
yes, I'm thinking.
Yeah. So that's it.
No, I think we can't solve all problems at once. Yeah, so that's, I think, a good start. So if this effect takes place, so be it.
Okay. So
if you're solving the housing crisis, perhaps that's something, and yeah, you can always, like the Dutch government always does, make new rules and tax them and get the money back. Stage. They're very good at that. So I think it's important to focus, and solving problems with more rules is not helping. It's not helping solve any problem.
Would it be of any aid, and I heard your comment, Anita, on, yeah, I'm not really sure, during the social taxonomy creation, there was somebody from housing at the table. Would that actually be useful to have like a more profound voice within the debate and within the rule creation?
I guess for the Netherlands, you know, I agree, it's maybe not such an issue, but this is a really special, beautiful social housing sector, even if you feel like it's not working now. And I think for countries like Poland, trying to start up a social housing sector, or Spain, you know, well, they're not completely starting, but I think it's important, more important for those countries maybe. I think it could work. It's just that the ESG is supposed to be intertwined. That's supposed to be the point. And you cannot get the E without having the S in place. You can't, have green housing if you don't have a home, or, so the S has to be in place before you get a lot of the E outcomes that the green taxonomy purports to direct us towards. So my answer would be for those countries, it's more important than for the Netherlands, because it's already really established here really well.
Then, of course, we get into a conflict from a money perspective, because a money perspective, well, only has the environmental taxonomy at play, because that's the important thing. So if you look at CSRD and we look at SFDR, all the sustainability reporting, it's mainly about environmental, and it's, well, only a very, very, very short amount, well, very little amount about social. So then actually we're back at, well, one of the points made earlier, that there should be some reporting, some data, some transparency on the social aspect of housing.
I think if you look at any reports of social housing companies, I think about half is about all kinds of S stuff already. Right. So they are reporting, it's not exactly the same for each housing company.
Yeah.
I don't find that a problem, because they're also acting locally, and they're not in competition with each other. Yeah. So there's less of a need to be able to fully compare the two.
Well, but as you already mentioned within the introduction, social housing corporations do not need to report, so it's voluntarily. Right. So you can actually also write whatever suits you, because there's no template, there's no ruling. You can do as you like. But for instance, investors and banks and financial institutions, well, they need to comply. So I can imagine that in the near future, also banks and investors in general, let's call it the money men and women, will actually say to you, yeah, you have to comply with some kind of our reporting rules.
There are reporting rules. There's an ADAS benchmark. I think 90% of all housing associations participate in that. Yeah. It includes ES, maybe G, not sure.
Not sure. Not yet.
No. So, but there is a lot of already public information. It's standardized, so you can compare these housing associations. So I think there is already a great framework. We have performance assessments, visitaties, that's more qualitative. That also assesses housing associations. So there's already a lot in place.
And is that linked towards the necessary, from a European point of view, regulation on reporting for like finance sector?
Why is it relevant? Why should you do that?
Well, because of the sorry. Yeah.
No, I would like to say something, because I think I would not worry too much about the S here. We are talking about housing associations, and the S is part of the DNA. Otherwise, all these organizations across Europe don't exist. I would like to mention one example from the UK. I know non-EU anymore, but the UK housing associations are much closer to the capital markets, as Anita knows. And also, since 2020, the UK already has a very sector-specific reporting standard. It's called the UK Sustainability Reporting Standard. It's on a voluntary basis. It's developed in joint venture between the housing associations and the lenders and investors. At this moment, more than 110 housing associations are adopters, and also 46 lenders and investors. So not only commercial lenders as ABN AMRO, but also the legal and generals of this work are also adopted. And what they did is step by step, although not required, but that's not the most important thing in reporting. It's about the value chain, what comes that you all need data from each other. And they developed in joint venture and also raising the bar with all the, say, sustainability reporting landscaping, what are actually the most important E, S, and G criteria to report against. So it is, the S is always quite obvious and quite evident. The E, we see everyone struggling. That makes sense. By the way, also the same OECD published a report a couple of months ago that also the financial institutions in Europe are also still struggling with reporting against the like carbons and EPCs. And the G is also, I always say, it's the less sexy part of the ESG, because we all work in housing all across Europe in a very regulatory environment already. So the focus is, I think, particularly on the E, if we talk about reporting and data, supported by the proof of evidence, the nature of these organizations, and that is the S. But we already have, I think, quite some good examples how it could work in, again, in the cooperation between the lender and the borrower community in this.
Okay. Well, thank you for that insight. So how is the data then today generated and collected?
Today?
Not yet.
Well, like Gerard said, especially in the age benchmark, there's a lot of data already standardized that everybody fills in every year. So that's why we're also for our project aiming at what can we, how can we use the age benchmark already? But the interesting thing is going to be if we get from the funding side, from the financial, from the banks actually, what are the data points they need to have the information. Are those the same or are they very different? Well, then we have to see if we have to adjust extra points, actually data points to the ATIS benchmark. Because that's like, we think that the best way to get standardized data that everybody is already used to collect in that way. So our dream is that you have like one button in the ATIS benchmark you can click and then it says ESG report.
Can I add to
that?
Adding to that, there's a lot more information, also standardized information. Housing associations need to deliver to the government, the DVEs. So there's already an additional source of information you can use that is not currently all visible in the ATIS benchmark.
Right.
So there's a lot of potential there.
We're looking for the housing authority.
Yeah, yeah.
And we are also just starting this year with an HRM monitor, PNO monitor, to get more information about the organizations, the inclusivity of the organization itself. So we can also use that data.
Good.
I think financial institutions are already reporting with the SFDR.
Yes, it's 1 year. Yeah.
So I don't expect many more questions. So we've already reported, right? So and of course it's a moving target and things will be added, but perhaps some things will drop off. And I don't think it would make very much sense in asking, but again, I don't think the bank decides it. The EU, asking for things that you don't find relevant. That would be silly.
Maybe this corporate sustainability reporting directive, maybe you are obliged to report things you do not know from the housing associations. What you said, so maybe you need more information from housing associations to comply with your own reporting.
I'm not the one responsible for reporting, but
but maybe your colleague.
I would say that we have that information, or we would have already asked it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Not so easy.
No, it's a moving.
It's moving. SFDR will get its first update by the end of this year, and there will be a lot of focus on SS. So how did you use your proceedings from a social point of view? So yeah, there will be some burden in getting more data and doing some more collection. I'm pretty convinced. So on that one, and then of course the question becomes, is it something that, well, is social housing or the ones that are actually providers? Are they those the ones that are actually are going to collect that data and report that data? Because again, that's an overhead cost, and will that go somehow noticed in the actions you can take from a limited budget, if I am not mistaken?
Yeah, as you say, it's a cost. I guess it's also important quality-wise to have some link with the actual, outcomes that social housing providers are recording and what residents, there should be some link there, but it's hard to get the balance right on who the burden falls on and where the resources are to do this reporting.
That's also for every company, yeah, reporting. So we all have the administrative burden, and unfortunately have to cope with it. Well.
Yeah, that's for sure. But yeah, the margins and the profit are somewhere. So
nobody's happy.
Yeah, so that's always the case, of course. Maybe one last question from my end, and then I leave it up to everybody here. So we see those. Sorry,
we've got a question.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, please do.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Sonia, over to you if you want to unmute and ask the question.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah. Very good.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for a very, very interesting session today. I've been taking notes, lots of notes, very, very interesting. I just wanted to make a comment more than a question, like, because you were talking about the need for reporting on S as a way of improving the assessment of how well you do on S. But I guess that the key problem, and I'm talking from English context perspective, is how you define what social housing is. And the way it's defined, for example, in England as affordable housing is like a big umbrella term that encompasses anything from social housing, which some people call genuinely affordable housing, and also on the other end of the spectrum, discounted market housing, which is with a little discount of 20%. So in a place like London, not very affordable for the majority of people. So when it comes to the reporting, a lot of the housing associations or other registered social providers, they don't break down the different types of social housing they are providing. They just call it affordable housing. And therefore, there can be a false perception on how well you're doing in achieving S. So the same way, I mean, I don't know if going, I guess this is taking back the conversation and the discussion to the idea of the taxonomy of social housing. But if that is a way of protecting what some people call is the genuinely affordable housing and channeling efforts on providing housing for the most vulnerable, the ones that will never be able to access housing through the market, then maybe we need to make an effort in both doing that taxonomy and also ensuring that there is a similar level of reporting on the S as there is on reporting on the G. That's it.
Thank you.
Anyone wants to?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, but that's maybe a very thing linked to the English context is that they have an affordable housing segment that is linked to market rents. It's discounted. But if the market rents, like in London, are super, super high and you discount 30 or 20%, the result is still unaffordable. But within this sector, it's labeled affordable, which is kind of, yeah.
So instead of a new definition would help.
Yeah,
or solve the problem, right?
Yeah, or link it to real affordability.
Yeah, you would probably be the same, but
the problem would be
clear.
Yeah,
but you have
it will be uniform.
Dutch context, no, with the non-DAB sector being included and the guarantee and being reported in a
Yeah. In the Dutch sector, like I said, it's very clear what is DAB, what is social, what is not DAB, so what is like free sector. But it's also interesting because sometimes, well, when we think of the S and those affordability and stuff like that, it can also be very helpful, like we discussed before, for the livability in the neighborhoods to add some DAB in your very much DAB neighborhood. So then it's not affordable, not as affordable as for the DAB, but it can still add a lot on the S side, but then more on the livability.
Yeah.
So I don't think you should look at it like it's this or that. I think it's always like the combination and what is the aim that you have with like investments in DAB or DAB.
Yeah, and we have this mid-segment now, and it's more clear what that is and where it ends. And that's the same in Groningen as in Amsterdam. So it's not linked to markets, local markets.
Okay.
It needs to be linked to the people paying the rent, not the market dynamics that create the value or determine the value.
Now, We learned just a few hours ago that green premium doesn't exist. There only will be a brown discount, so prices will go down. So then the supply idea, will that solve itself? Will there not a lot of mid-segment houses be possible within the social housing range from reevaluating rent and the price, the worth of the real estate? And will that then not be very, well, on the pressure of, for instance, areas that will to certain flood, that can have a huge impact on the housing appreciation, on the prices, also from an affordability point of view, then maybe that will be depreciated. The point I want to make is like, won't we get into trouble where all social housing will be in certain areas where we know there will be problems in the future? And that will be automatically without intervention of whomever?
It's a very difficult question, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine.
The floods and the earthquakes.
No, but there will be a new market, in my view, because there are people who don't have access at all to affordable housing, and they say, well, I'm 55 and I have only 25 years to live. I take the gamble. Let's move to that house because it's affordable now. So it gives me access, and before I didn't have the access, so I will do that. So in my view, there will be a new group of participants to that market.
So you can swim.
Yeah, the ones who can swim.
Yeah, but I think that the housing crisis is like so huge that it's first about getting a house, and then you don't have much choice actually.
Okay, so I learned today that it's all about community and diversified income and ecosystem and all those things. Now we have climate change coming. We will have actually a new market of people that have no other choice than to live there. That's literally what we're saying. And then, that's it. Because nobody's going to invest in those areas. Nobody's going to protect those areas. Because again, if you start protecting them, then you will actually disrupt the system that's going on there. So is that the right policy?
Lots of solutions to increase supply in a way that's climate resistant.
Okay.
Within this building, we have a lot of suggestions and solutions that can really contribute to that. So it's something we should embrace and also invest, because we need more supply.
Probably this country will lead some of that in the world.
Let's hope.
I do agree that insurance is going to be the next big, massive problem with just huge areas that will not be insurable. So good that you raised it.
Okay, so thank you very much. I'm looking at the audience now. Anybody has comments, questions, insights he wants to share? Please. She wants to share? I'm still learning my inclusiveness.
Thank you so much. It was a very interesting discussion, got a lot of perspectives. So I'm a PhD researcher at Leiden University, and I'm actually looking at renovation, circular renovation, focusing on the social housing sector. So I was wondering so we were talking a lot about new builds and affordable housing. So what about renovation? And if we look at renovation, a couple of questions. First of all, do banks see renovation opportunities in the social housing sector as a way to preserve value and prevent value destruction, if you might call it? And if so, do they have an incentive to indeed finance these projects? That was one. Another question was about the environmental aspect. So are we pricing environmental externalities right? Is there a way that this is actually included in the market price? So a couple of questions on that.
I will start with the last one. As I said before, it's not priced yet in the market value. We need to be there. As I said before, we need to change our minds of the valuers. It's an attitude. They should adapt to a new way of working, and that will take some time, so to speak. But it's now not pricing, and it will start with well, the houses which are built in Valkenburg aan de Geul, at the spot where the flooding was, that will be the first, and then we have references, and then it will spread across the country. So that's my view on the second question, which, by the way, are both very good questions. Thank you for that. I don't know whether someone else will.
Yeah, well, for now it's very difficult because the funding is like balance funding. So if a housing association is going to lend money, it's always for like a whole program of newly built renovations, etc. You cannot attach a part of the funding to renovations, etc. So I think maybe it should, but I don't think it's possible yet. Based on what the possibilities is to see what happens. It's not project funding, so that's difficult.
Yeah, so there are two elements. I
For
think
that,
so you have the funding side, which is not linked to projects,
Right.
but you also have the value side, which is linked to estates. It would be great if the valuation also incorporates circularity.
Right,
So I think
yeah.
that would really help. Because currently it's not really incorporated in the valuation of these assets, and only the really motivated housing associations are investing in circularity, also in renovations.
But in general, that's a very important aspect that Gerard said, because if you are going to into sustainability and get greener labels or get renovation, etc., you would expect that the value goes up. If the value goes up, you have more space to invest. Your LTV goes down if your value goes up. But it's not, there is not much knowledge about it at the moment. So it's a bit of a shame, because if the values are high, or the effect on the value is higher, or is there at least, then you can see like your LTV is improving.
Because it doesn't lead to more rent increase. For social housing, there's no rent increase possible if you make it more sustainable. Rent stays the same for the current tenants. So if it impacts value, then there's also financial benefits.
That's the only one left, actually. So
Yeah,
that's why it's such a shame that there's not much knowledge about it.
You would say the gap in terms of like environmental aspect is like material circularity, and how can that lead to increased valuation?
Right, yes.
And the valuation we're talking about is a valuation on a financial perspective.
And don't forget the renter here, because it's very hard to convince them to go out the house for, let's say, a couple of years for only sustainable, make their house sustainable. And it more helps. It helps very much more than if you give them a new kitchen or bathroom, and then they already might want to increase the rent. But to be honest, most of the renters are not happy to move from their house for renovation only sustainable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So that makes it a hard job for the renters as well.
Yeah. And why it's important that the value would, well, actually happily go up, but because there are restrictions on the financial continuity of the housing associations in terms of LTV, the loan to value, and the interest coverage ratio. So if you make your forecast for 10, 15 years ahead, authorities every year check what is your LTV, what is your ECR ratio. And if you're going above those ratios, under or above, then maybe you can, well, I don't think it costs that much, but you can lose your guarantee and stuff like that. So the authority is very strict on the LTV ECR. So it helps if you get a little bit more value for that LTV.
But to get that little more value, you need to invest first.
You need to invest, right? Yes. Okay. Yes, but because you make the forecast for quite a long period, you need to update for 10 years. The forecast for 10 years. So, and then if you see, oh, I need funding, I need lending, then you go to the bank. And like I said, we have two banks, so you go to one or the other, and then you attract the funding actually.
Okay, but there's only a brown discount. So value will go down.
Well, that's not completely correct.
Okay.
At the moment, there is a green premium. Like, in a certain amount of time, green premium will
Business
disappear,
usual.
and exactly, that will be the next level, and then you only have the brown discount.
Slowing down. Okay. So you have to be fast.
Exactly.
Time is now.
Act now.
Okay. And it's also like a different way of valuation for the social housing sector. So market value is a different term maybe actually.
Sure.
So that's also.
Yeah. That's for sure something we will research if market value is really the thing we should talk about, because that's a Leven, if you have any more questions.
Yeah, just a brief question about the benchmark maybe. You said that it's standardized for all housing associations underneath this. What are some parameters you measure in terms of, for example, environmental performance, and maybe what's already missing which you can add to it?
Right. I don't know by head what are all the data points, but
Luckily.
that's a good thing. I'll remember it, and maybe I can send you the information and then can collect with Alex. Because there are big reports about everything that's in the ADIS benchmark.
If you Google ADIS benchmark, you will
you'll
find
get
it.
it.
Yeah, you will get it. And you see all these different data points, and also some of them are on CO2 reduction and label increase, this kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah.
Can I make one more observation? Because I'm from a European perspective, I'm working in sustainable finance in different countries. ESG, because that was also one of the main themes, is, in my opinion, also about reallocation of capital. And what I've seen over the last couple of years, fortunately, is that more and more private investment is coming into social and affordable housing. It can go either through loans or, like with BNG and WBA, as a bond aggregator through bond investors. And I think that is good because it also expands the lender base and diversifies the lender base. On the other hand, I also observe that this reallocation of capital is moving fast. So it's absolutely no guarantee that capital, say, remains into social and affordable housing for the next 5 or 10 years. And that's also a little bit what Andy said. This is, I think, the coming 4 or 5 years is really the momentum that social and affordable housing across Europe can leverage on that, say, unlocking sustainable finance. I'm not saying that it's not happening 5 or 6, 7 years from now, but at least I think all the social and affordable housing providers in Europe have the opportunity to actually tap in now, because I think ESG conditions are, say, pretty good. Let's put it this way.
Very good. That's completely. I do agree with that one. So thank you very much. Yeah.
Sorry, maybe one last question. Asking as an interested researcher, what would you think are the topics that we should be looking at in terms of trying to analyze the changes in social and housing finance in general? What would be your further research steps? One idea that comes to mind is, for example, the emissions trading system and how that would have an impact on value. If the cost of energy is going to be much higher, that will create or put forward a brown discount in a way towards less energy efficient properties. But yeah, I'm really interested in hearing from the panel.
Yeah, my research question would be a little bit like you said before, what is the effect of sustainability investments on the value? I think that's help a lot.
You already said that housing associations are really prospecting their investments over a long period of time using these ratios like interest coverage ratios, loan to value ratio. I see a lot of housing associations hitting these ratios in 5 years' time. So I'm interested in are there other ways of financing housing refurbishment of new construction, maybe equity financing that doesn't hit these indicators. I'm not sure if that's possible. You see examples outside of the Netherlands, but I don't see that within them.
I think you've got Sage in the UK, maybe it's an example of using funding from Blackstone.
Yeah.
More housing.
Not only funding, also funds, affordable housing funds.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
We out of time. Just one consideration is that a lot of the S is stuff that is additional to housing, like neighborhood development and care and all of that stuff. And that's not really in the equation. It may be more important in other sectors outside the Netherlands that do more of that. And I guess also thinking about whether lenders need quantitative data, and there's so much of the S that is difficult to get into that. And what Ad described in the UK does reduce everything to a pound. And would that, it works in a lot of ways, but would that be palatable for Europe? Yeah.
I don't know if there's any final reflections from the side.
Everybody had everything they had to say said, yeah? Okay, very good. Then I'd like to thank you for being present here and participating in a very interesting debate. We're going to give the floor to Hilde to wrap it up. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I would also like to say thank you to all speakers, audience, and organizers here. And I'm also honored to be the one who get to wrap this up. It's not easy because we had a very good discussion and had some really nice introductions as well. So starting with the question that Maria raised at the beginning, what is the impact of ESG? Now and in the future. And then Alex showed us what the pillars of ESG are. We learned that the EU Sustainable Finance Framework sometimes clashes with the existing financial structures for social housing organizations. And that ESG covers the E well, but maybe it's not as well developed in the S and the G. And that ESG is creating divisions across providers and countries, something that we came back to in the end in the discussion as well. Then Jasmine told us that we need to reconsider actually our idea about value, how we apply value principles. And Maria introduced a research on how we preserve value and how we can evaluate value at risk. And this was a nice point that Rainier also hooked onto, telling us that we might soon be going from green premiums to brown discounts, and we need to act now. Then we move to the E, S, and the G in the discussion in the panel. And where we heard that the E is quite well covered, that's quite interesting because even though it's well covered, it seems that it's not still not well defined, or maybe it's developing still. And we need to incorporate more issues into the E as well. But there is no E without the S, so no E without social housing, you could say. But then what is exactly the S? What is the, it starts with provision and affordability, but there is also the topic of solidarity. So solidarity not only between different groups in society, but also between generations. And maybe also between countries, if we look at this from a European perspective. Then trying to find the G in here. And it's defined somehow. I think Maya did a job at this in her introduction. but we see quite some differences and some divisions between different countries and between providers. And the question that is raised is also, do we need a standard for the G? Do we need a specific standard in order to be able to cover this? So how important will the ESG be for financing affordable housing? I think that's the main question that we're here to discuss. And I think that we learned that we still need to include it in valuation, and that it's not well included yet. But that this is something that we need to work on, also valuers in practice. And that to be able to do this, they need a good framework for how to incorporate the ESG valuation. And to conclude, I think I have learned a lot today. This is not a topic that I'm normally working on. But I'm also really looking forward to hear more from ongoing research, and especially on the research that Alex is working on. And it gives us some really interesting ideas already quite some interesting results as well. Interesting in the Dutch way, yes. So I will continue following your work and see where that will take us forward. I think everyone has been thanked, but still I would like to say thank you to Michael and Alex for initiating this discussion, and also for inviting us all to be here today and have this debate with each other. So thank you.
Thanks. We've got drinks now, which